think we're live then.
Yeah. Hello, everybody.
Hi, everyone. I just realized I had to press one more button to come in because I'm on it. So I was talking to myself for 2 minutes. So let me start. So hi, everyone. Thanks again for attending this last session of the hyper casual track. And it's from all our surveys, this was one of the most highly anticipated panel and talk. So I'm just going to start by the way, we are waiting for one more panelist to join. He's having some technical difficulty. Our tech team is helping to get him on stage. But in the meantime, I'm just going to talk a little bit about this market that we are in, right? There's a lot of buzz around there. There's a lot of predictions around how soon hyper casual is going to die. There's a lot of myths around this, right? And just to give an idea, different in market intelligence tools predict like around 45% of the total downloaded mobile games last year was hyper casual, right? And the trend is definitely continuing this year. And different reports predict like 20% of the top 1,000 US charts were hyper casual this year. Now, with this massive opportunity in this hand, where any studio from part of the world can actually make a global hit, including from India, right, and be part of this global charts. We kick off this panel here where we hear the views from the esteemed panelists I have the honor of actually hosting today, who represent like the third one will join shortly, but they represent three of the leading hyper casual publishers in the world. Even me, I work at a hyper casual publisher called Sunday, someone who started recently and new and later than these guys out there. We look up to these guys. Some of these guys wrote the playbooks, have immense successes, always share interesting insights. So it's great they could make it. And today, and there's one thing also common for the two things that make these panelists interesting is between the three of them, they own, I think, probably the largest market share in this category, but also three of them have something in common of making at least one global hyper casual hit from India. I guess more in case of Shai and William. With this, I would like to introduce William Cox, the head of publishing for Quali, and Shai Sesson, the head of publishing. Oh, here we are. Shai, head of publishing for Crazy Labs. Many of you in India would already know Quali and Crazy Labs because of their presence in India. And then we have, last but not the least, Alexander Shia, head of publishing at Voodoo. Probably every one of us have looked up Voodoo's tutorials or videos. They wrote the playbook, I guess, or one of the few to even kickstart this industry. So pleasure, and thanks for joining us, Alex. So to start with, we would, Alex, can we do a quick voice check? Can you say something? Oh, no.
Oh, dear.
I'm not sure if, I think he's still having tech difficulty. We'll wait for a couple of minutes, but William and Shai, please go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure, shall I go first?
Go for it.
So, hello everyone, I'm Will, the head of mobile publishing at Quali. My background is all or mostly mobile games. I was at Sega for around about a decade looking after publishing in the US. I've been living in Asia for the last 7 years, initially in Japan for a couple of years doing strategy and investor relations with Sega, then moved over to Singapore about 5 years ago with a company called Go Game, which was an invested company by Sega looking after strategy, roadmaps, our studio in the Philippines, and then more recently I did a short stint at Ubisoft before very recently joining Quali.
Hey everyone, so I'm Shai, I'm the head of publishing here at Crazy Labs. I manage the publishing team, the global publishing team, headquartered here in Tel Aviv, in Israel, where I am. Our teams are located in all over the world, including India, and many others. We work with hundreds of studios from all around the world, from the ideation and concepting stage until the game is fully developed and released, published worldwide.
Awesome. Thanks for the introductions. I guess we are still not able to have Alex. What we can do is we can start with some.
But actually, yeah, sorry. I'm really sorry about the connection. It seems to be working now. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we can all hear you okay, but you made a timely exit. It was, yeah. I would say you were not late, but like perfect timing.
Yeah, I was trying to create as much FOMO as I could by leaving after about 2 seconds.
So yeah, Alex, we just finished with Will and Shai's introduction, so you can just introduce yourself and, everybody knows Voodoo, but you can say something, whatever you like about Voodoo.
Awesome. Okay, sounds good. Well, sorry I missed the introductions, but I'm already aware of your background, so that's all good. So I manage the publishing team at Voodoo, and we're super excited to be presenting today. And India is a huge market for us, especially in terms of the studio talent that we see in the region. So very excited to be here and to dig into some of the topics that we'll be covering today.
Awesome. To start off, and we have had like many talks before this panel, right? And one question that always pops on each talk, each panel is like, what are we talking about when we call a hyper-casual hit game? So in that context, probably it's interesting for each of you to name your biggest hyper-casual hit that was made in India and whatever. I know that you cannot share all like exact numbers due to confidentiality, but whatever you can share in terms of downloads, revenues, then maybe you get an idea of to developers. Like if I make a hit in this scale, what can I actually make, even if it's a bold game, right? So Alex, maybe we can start with you.
Sure, absolutely. So happy to get into those details. The biggest, so we've just to clarify, we've had three. I'd say we'd have three main big hits, which doesn't mean we have other hits. So we've had Stack Colors with over 100 million downloads, Fireballs with over 90 million downloads, and Whirly Vortex, which is a bit of an earlier one with 60 million downloads. And so I don't have the exact dollar per dollar detail of these, but the important thing to bear in mind, in my view, is that when you publish a hit with Voodoo, the average payout is over $1 million. And I think for developers that are starting out, even for developers that are just trying to run a business that could have 10, 15 developers in a studio with that amount, over $1 million is a big amount. Now the payouts, I can't go directly into the payout of each of those, but the payouts generally are on average 1 million, but sometimes you can go up to 3, 4 million. It can go beyond that, but those are the ranges. I say 1 to 10, on average over 1, and those are 3 examples of big games that would definitely be in that range.
Amazing.
And then this is
how
for
would
studio
you define, and in terms of downloads, for sure a hit game, you need a LTV greater than CPI, but in terms of numbers that you shared, what's the scale of downloads we are talking about? Is it like something over 1 million downloads or 10 million downloads? How would you define a hit game in the Voodoo world?
Just going back to those games that were created in India, so Stack Colors, from Red Force, generate over 100 million downloads globally until now and counting. Fireballs was 90 million from Nixan Tech, and Rolly Vortex from BDJ was 60 million.
Amazing, and all of these were made in India, right?
The 3 were made in India, and we've made more games from the Indian market, but I'm just taking, I believe, the biggest 3.
Great. Shai, would you like to go next?
Sure. So, games like soap cutting, acrylic nails, and hair dye, all are games that were developed by Indian studios. Actually, one studio. Soap cutting reached, I think, 100 million downloads just recently. Acrylic nails over 100 million. Hair dye around 40 million. It's a rather recent game that was published. This studio that started working with us, Firescore Interactive, was recently acquired by Crazy Labs and is now an official Crazy Labs studio, and we've actually worked with obviously numerous studios from India, but I would say these are the biggest hits that came out from India with Crazy Labs. And I would agree with Alex that obviously we can't disclose specific numbers, but the ballparks mentioned are very similar for big hits. Obviously, there are games that are not huge hits but can still generate nice revenue stream, even though they're not millions and millions of tens of millions of downloads. Some of them might be smaller and can still generate a nice amount of revenue stream lifetime for these studios.
Awesome. Thanks, Shai. Will?
Yeah, so similar thoughts in terms of metrics and the kind of success that we've seen. We have a couple of games that we've been working on. We've got the Cricket Star that's been doing quite well, and then we've got a couple of games in sort of our test process at the moment. Obviously, one of the big reasons we set up in India is because we see sort of so much potential from the market, so many developers that are really starting to embrace hyper casual and are doing very well. In terms of sort of what we see, the numbers are very similar. We're looking at sort of multiple millions of dollars that we pay out to studios for having successful titles. And of course, in India, that keeps a studio going for a good amount of time. And so it's not even that you need to have a big hit, but one of those medium, smaller hits can actually sustain a company for a good amount of time. And we do pay out a lot of money to developers, and hopefully more over time with our Indian partners.
Yeah, and coming from the ecosystem, it's totally I can connect to. Hyper casual game production is about like having small teams, lean teams, speed, like fast production, and most importantly, led by data, right? Which publishers such as yourself are more than happy to provide not just data but like interpretations of this data that help the developers either move fast to the next iteration or kill the project and move to the next idea, right? And coming from India, everybody says I'm biased towards India. I do see high potential, but I would like hear the thoughts of you guys, since you've already worked with so many developers from India, but also you work with developers from all around the world. So I would like to really, can you sum up your thoughts on the potential of developers from the Indian hyper-casual ecosystem compared to what you see in the world? Alex, maybe you want to go first?
Sure, I'll kick it off. What I see in India as a whole is that it is a market, I think, that performed early on. Because if you take a game like Rolly Vortex, that goes back to, I believe, I don't want to say something stupid. It was either 2017 or beginning of 2018. I think it was one of the two. So they're very much early adopters into hyper casual. So I see it as a market that's both mature with a number of great studios, which is fantastic, but also a market that is emerging. And that's, I think, the strength of this market is that so many new great studios with great potential are coming into the market every day. They're realizing that actually you don't need a huge studio to make a big hit. They're very talented developers. They're great engineering schools that are emerging great talent, and that's a big edge. Also, the cost of development is relatively small if you're comparing to countries like the US, to take an extreme example, or the Nordics. So it is a really powerful, I think, engine for growth in hyper casual studios in the next few years to come. So I'd say that would be my quick overview of how we see India today.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, I started in hypercasual only last year, and I thought, there's so much potential in India. And I do some research, and I already see there's a game in India that's published by Voodoo, which has more than 100 million downloads. And I remember it was even a solo developer. But to see like a global publisher like Voodoo work with a single developer out of India was really amazing. Shah, would you like to go next?
Sure, I agree with that. Mentioned that entering the hyper casual prototyping and publishing would be a lower barrier for studios who just start, differently than casual or mid-core games where you need a lot of funding, a very long process of prototyping, developing until you have initial data on the game to understand if it's worth it to continue developing or not. So studios that are coming from India, it can be a small studio, one or two persons, or even a smaller studio with 5, 10, or 50 people. For these studios, it's an easier barrier to enter the gaming of the hyper casual. But more than that, we see that there's a lot of talent in India. There's a lot of universities, colleges, and professional courses that teach the gaming industry. Some of them, many of them, by the way, are specifically for hyper casual due to the growth and success. We've seen many of those collaborate with us and reach out to us since we've already established 2 hubs, crazy hubs in India, and interviewed many of these talents that are just starting their path to hyper casual, and obviously the funding needed in order to establish a studio and start prototyping is much lower than, let's say, Western Europe or US, for example. So all of this combined would create a talent that is growing more and more. And I believe, and obviously we see that here in Crazy Labs, investing a lot in India, it's tremendous growth for India and Crazy Labs as well.
Great. That's interesting to know there are universities actually focusing on hyper casual as courses. I would definitely ping you after the panel to get this and just visit them one day. That's super interesting. Thanks for sharing that. William, do you want to go next?
Yeah. I mean, so we see very similar things, right? I think, like Alex mentioned, there are some very experienced people in India. There's a lot of really high quality graduates coming through universities, and so there's a head start for the industry here, and then they've got this low barrier to entry with hyper casual. We see a lot of passion, dedication from the development teams we work with. They're very keen to sort of work with us, try and figure out what the right mix of things are to have a good hit, and that creates a really good relationship. We find doing business in India very, very easy, very positive. And so I think sort of combining that sort of really good skill level with the real keenness and then that ease of opportunity with hyper casual, there's a huge chance for Indian developers to have hits in the global market. And from a quality point of view and what's actually being produced, it's right up there with the best that we see from any other region as well. So it's a really exciting market to be in, and I think that a lot of people will follow the 4 of us and also be trying to find that great content from the region.
Yeah, that's amazing, and that goes in line with the success of the business model, right? You need to produce more for as low cost as possible and as fast as possible, and if you can say that you can actually compete with the global talent out there with a lower cost base, and of course it comes with the persistence, I guess, of this region. You can definitely do more, and that makes it interesting for publishers. Even like for Sunday, it's super interesting. So then my next question. And this is for you, William, and you, Shai. You guys have already a presence in India in terms of offices, partners. Shai, in your case, in terms of acquisitions. Can you share some light on how does it benefit the Indian developers through this presence? Maybe for this we start with you first. I read like there was some crazy amount of investment from you guys, for your offices in India and with staff and stuff. So maybe you can share something about like the thoughts behind that and experiences so far and specific to the developer ecosystem.
Yeah, there's a bit of a weird feedback coming through. I couldn't hear a lot of what you just said.
Sorry, do you want me to repeat it?
Yeah. I think I caught most of it.
I would like you to start here with this question here, where if you can share about your experiences, insights, and especially benefits to the Indian dev ecosystem, because Quali has a big presence in India, and I saw an announcement I think a couple of months ago about how Quali believes in the Indian ecosystem that makes them invest more in the ecosystem.
Yeah, definitely. So we have got sort of a long-term big investment plan in India. I think the headlines speak for themselves, right? I think it's millions and millions of dollars over the next couple of years, and this is really because we do see so much potential in the market here. We've got our HQ in Leamington is sort of the hub of this type of gaming in the UK. And that's exactly what we saw with the Indian studio, and we wanted to do something quite similar. So essentially what we're trying to do is set up a one studio mindset, but obviously based in two locations. And this is something that's been proven out as something that can work during COVID. Lots of people are remote, lots of people are now having video calls and being involved in things on a global scale. And so we're working very hard to make sure that our team operates as one, and we have, the team in India is not the Indian team, it's the development team that works with the development team in the UK or any other team. We have similar levels of skills across all of those, the functions that we bring in. So the team in India are really contributing to everything we're doing. And I guess the knock-on effect for developers in the region is that means that we've got expertise here. We're feeding the ecosystem, speaking to developers at the ground level, and they've sort of got very easy access to that expertise. They can learn things from our team. They've got a direct line to people that are in the country, understand what they're doing, can sort of speak to them on a level that they understand. And I think that's a massive help to the studios, and I think that our long-term plan is to work with many, many more studios, grow out our presence in India, and really invest for the long term. So we do see a huge benefit in being here.
And did that help you work with more Indian developers than before, compared to before you had the office in India?
So it's definitely opening up opportunities, right? When we've got we're slowly growing our publishing team at the moment. We've just made one of our first publishing manager hires. And, local knowledge is really important to who to speak to, networking, getting to the right events, speaking to the right people. So we fully expect that it will accelerate the amount of publishing deals we can do with the developers in India.
Amazing. That's interesting. And over to you, Shai, next. And this is interesting. When Quali, it seems like an outside in, coming from Leamington Spa, setting up an office in India. And for you, from whatever I've read, it's inside out, right? You started working with a partner, you acquire them, you started a hub with them. And maybe you can even talk a bit more about your hubs. That's really, it sounds super interesting for the ecosystem.
Yeah, so I guess it circles back to why India is a growth market due to the low barrier and the talent that is there. Being present helps in many ways. The assistance that some of these studios need is more than just access to a dashboard where they can submit games and test them, but more of a mentoring process that the publisher can support. So Crazy Labs already established a few hubs. The first one, I think maybe the second one actually was in India, the Crazy Hubs, and we've recently opened a second Crazy Hub in India, and the goal for these is exactly that, mentoring early stage studios that are looking to enter the hyper casual scene. Some of them might be very experienced, but maybe not so much in hyper casual, and mentor them and guide them through the process of developing a hyper casual successful game, the testing process, and the trends today. Obviously, hyper casual changes very quickly, and the adoption needed from that. So having mentors on the ground in a space where they collaborate together brings a great added value. But I do agree that regardless of the crazy apps, some of the studios in India would like a dedicated publishing manager or dedicated team that can help these studios, within their time zone, within their level of thought, to prototype better and potentially have hyper casual hits. And we do see obviously this growth and success, and that's the reason that we're planning actually to expand that and have more hubs in different areas in India. Obviously, India is big, so I guess that's it.
Amazing, and the whole story of with Firescore, where you they started as a studio, they become your partner, then they started a hub, and they acquired it, and it's super nice because as from someone from the Indian dev ecosystem, because you can say, hey, they're like one of us, you can connect, you can really connect with them, right? And perfect, I would say, textbook poster story, amazing, great job over there. Alex, coming to you, I'm assuming, or from what I know, Voodoo doesn't have an office in India yet or presence in India. But what's your thoughts on, or what does Voodoo? Maybe you can share something about what does Voodoo do to work more closely with the Indian ecosystem, because you do happen to have these many hits, and they're not coming out of nowhere without you doing nothing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I'd say is echoing, I think, what William said about being one team. We actually have our core publishing team is based in Paris. We do have a publishing team in Turkey, and we do have a couple of publishing managers in Asia, so one in Singapore, one in Japan. But really what we like to do is centralize as much as we can, because what we found is that knowledge sharing works best if you create big hubs of publishing managers rather than spread them out. So we're not saying that the model isn't relevant for India. It's very much relevant, but we find that serving them centrally from Paris mainly is the best way to make sure that the same publishing manager that's covering a game like Bounce and Collect, or a game like City Takeover, if I'm just citing a couple of games this year, is covering studios that may be emerging, maybe like 6-month-old studios somewhere that is harder to access in India. We want to make sure that the publishing managers covering the best studios, the best games, and so forth, are the same ones covering studios that have recently come into our ecosystem. And so we found that the best way to do that is actually to serve them from Paris. So that's what we did with the games that I cited, and that's what we're doing with our pipeline of games and studios. It doesn't mean that we don't find India to be a super attractive geography. It just means that we actually prefer to serve those studios from Paris in the same way that we'd serve a studio from Russia, from the US, from France, and so forth.
Amazing. And you do have the advantage of the function of time, right? Of amassing this knowledge and stuff. And for each company, you need to play to your strengths. We at Sunday also, like, we do everything from Germany, but we are coming to India, I think, end of the year. Let's see how it goes. Maybe I catch some tips from you guys who have already been there. Cool. And moving on to the next question, and this popped up during every talk during this track is 30 cents CPI still relevant? I can't think of better guys than you guys actually answering this question. Any of you can start.
Yep. So I'm happy to take this one first, unless I'll be quick, guys. And the reason I think it's not bad that I take it first is we get this question a lot. A lot of studios out there, whether we're working with them yet or not, think we have these mysterious launch KPIs and that we're super selective with the KPIs. Actually, we have no launch KPIs. It's worth noting. So what we now do is for every prototype that gets submitted into our dashboard and tested, we spit out a unique score, and that score will then tell you whether this prototype should be iterated or whether it should be killed. To me, that's the big decision. It's, as a studio, am I investing more time in this game, or am I killing it and moving on to the next? That we found that to be the most important decision, because if you iterate, then there's a fairly good chance that we will go all the way to launch. We'll work on it. It means there's potential. If we don't, then you're working on your next very high value project. Long story short, the KPI is not 30 cents. It's a mix of your CPI, your playtime, your retention, and the CPMs on the market. This is how we calculate our score. So we want to take into account both CPI on the UA side and CPM on the monetization side, so that you're market neutral in your analysis of a game's performance. And then you look at engagement, and that gives you your score, basically. And that's a really powerful new tool that we're using with studios. It's basically, if your score is above a certain threshold, then it's worth iterating, and then most likely it's worth launching. That could be a 40-cent CPI and a 60% day one, for example, or it could be a 10-cent CPI and a 30% day one retention. So it's all about the full picture.
That's super interesting. And just as a follow-up question, what do the studios have to? How big of a prototype do they have to submit? Is it something? I'm guessing it's not just like putting up videos in Blender and give it to you. Is it something like 2 levels, 3 levels, 5 levels, or 10 levels? Like for your tool to be able to assess this and accurately.
So I'll take the follow-up because I think it relates to our testing protocol. The biggest thing you want to test out first is marketability. And to do that, we recommend, if you're not doing a procedurally generated game, and it takes some specific level generation per level, then we recommend to do the minimal viable, just to see barely, what's your funnel from level 1 to level 5 to 10, right? Max. But don't do more. That's really important not to do too much early. Just to do something that represents how marketable it is, so we'll get CPI metrics. And then once you iterate, at every step of the way, you're investing the right amount of resources on content and on engagement. But you always want to carefully check in with your publishing manager. What level of investment on the content creation side do you want to put in? First test, in our view, should always be minimal in terms of content, if it's not procedurally generated.
Interesting. Nice. Thanks for sharing, Alex. Shai, would you like to take this next?
Sure. In my point of view, it's a bit more complex to give a straight answer, yes, 30 cents or not. But we at Crazy Labs here are looking at the things a bit differently. Not very far from Voodoo, I would say, but a bit differently. 30 cents where? Facebook? Maybe that's not the only answer that we should take into consideration when testing the marketability of the game. So we have KPIs for Facebook and TikTok, and in some cases we'll have different audiences in these networks. TikTok is now not a smaller source of testing and scaling than Facebook and others. And we found out that TikTok can still be a good indication of the potential of the marketability of a game. So considering only Facebook might not be the best way to go with, although Facebook is still a very big channel to test the games on. But it is a KPI where you still need to understand if your game is marketable or not. So if you have a 60 cents CPI, I think it's important to understand that in hyper casual you won't be able to scale the game so much, but iterating might still be worth it. Again, looking at other metrics and not simply only CPI would make more sense for many developers. Again, depended on the investment needed in order to continue the development and prototyping. Some of the games that we've released didn't have 30 cents CPI. It started with 40 and up, but these games still reached the top 10 and are still very, very profitable. But it's a mix of the usage, retention, and CPI. And purely looking at CPI without discussing the game with the publishing manager and understanding if there is potential or not might cause you to drop games that don't perform well. And lastly, I would say that in initial tests, okay, you might need to have a certain KPI for the CPI, but later on, games that don't meet this KPI, so for example, a game that started with a low CPI, that ended up with 60 or even 70 or even 80 cents CPI during the testing funnel, but still has potential in terms of usage and retention, can still be a profitable game. We've launched our Publishing for All initiative, where we publish games that usually would be dropped because they didn't reach the point where they can be scalable, and we'll still publish those games. Not under Crazy Labs account and not in high profile. They will remain under the developer account with low effort on both sides. But these games can still generate a nice revenue stream for smaller studios. Maybe not millions, but thousands and thousands of dollars can still be a very nice revenue stream for developers who reach the point where you either kill the game or not, and they invested a lot in it, time, efforts, resources, and more. So this kind of initiative allows studios with higher CPI that did end up in a certain point in the testing funnel to still be published profitably.
That's super interesting. I would like to come back on that when especially on the point of when you're not able to make a game that can scale to the millions. What can you do with it, right? Just for the audience, I know TikTok is banned in India, but doesn't matter, because this is about marketing games in the West, where TikTok is very much alive. And if you want to check what's latest on TikTok, go to YouTube and check the latest TikTok trends. You'll definitely get the data over there. Cool. William, would you like to share your perspective on this?
Yeah, I mean, we have very similar thoughts on this, really. You've got the two sides of the equation, right? How much does it cost to bring a user in versus what does that user generate for you? We do have certain KPIs we're looking to hit for the different ad platforms, but it really does depend on what your other metrics are doing as well, right? If you're spending a lot on CPI but the game's making a lot of money, that's okay. But you are somewhat limited in the number of levers that you've got to pull, right? So if your CPI is high, you need to do something within those resources to actually generate more money, and it's obviously going to be much harder to scale with a higher CPI. You need to make bigger changes in order to make that viable in the market. So it's always a balancing act, and within that, you need to weigh up what's the biggest impact you can have in the game for the least amount of effort, and where should your effort go into making the game successful. And the likelihood is that if your CPI is too high, that's going to be something that's very difficult to solve. So I think the important thing is not one side of the equation. It's what does the whole thing look like, and what are your options in the form of taking it forward and turning it into a successful title. And that's always going to be something different for each game, for each opportunity, for just different times are going to generate different results. The trends are going to change. So it's really important to weigh up your options and really quickly make that decision of, should we iterate and move forward, or actually is our time better spent finding something that does hit those lower CPIs and moving on to an opportunity that can generate a return for you.
Nice. Yeah. Even on Sunday for us, what we also tell studios, and we do this, where as long as your LTV is greater than your CPI and you have a profit margin of 25% for 1 million downloads in a 30 days period, there is some money there, right? You can do it. And as long as it doesn't require heavy content updating, heavy maintenance, and you can, and like what Alex mentioned, procedural levels, it does work out. Coming back to you, Shai, do you, since you do this or seem to do this a lot, how does a developer know that this? Let's say they didn't achieve this 30 cents CPI or 35 cents. They failed the initial test for the scale. Do you have any kind of a tool, or how do you help them predict this revenue for them to see whether it's worth for them to do this or not?
So it's very similar to what William and Alex said here. It's a combination of the retention and usage that we test through our dashboard, and the developers were able to see this transparently. But it's important to understand that KPIs are there for a reason, and if you want to make a profit out of your game, something has to give. But if the game is still profitable, then we'll publish it either on a regular publishing agreement or a publishing for all agreement, but it needs to enter the testing funnel and have one of those in order to continue through the funnel, and then in order to understand if it's profitable, add monetization and analytics, and only by that you'll be able to understand if the game is profitable or not. But the goal is that if you invested time and effort in developing a game that reached to a point where you need to drop it after it passed a few of the tests and went through the testing funnel, then here would come this initiative. But some of the games that we've published, like Multimaze, for example, one of the recent games that we've released, started with $1 CPI, but was still published due to the usage and retention that this game had. Obviously, it was a collaboration of the studio and the internal teams that were able to help the studio decrease the CPI, not towards the 30-cent mark or below, but still decrease the CPI enough to scale the game, maintain the usage and retention, and monetize it correctly, and still make it a profitable game.
Nice. Coming to you, Alex, and you have tons of videos about how to reduce your CPI. I think Voodoo has tons and tons of tutorials that the community goes to, right? But how does it work for you? Even after following those tutorials, they do iterations, are not able to achieve that benchmark. Does it make sense for you to publish those games on a lower scale, or you would rather focus on the big hits? I mean, there's no right way of doing things, right? But I just wanted to ask, what's like Voodoo's approach on it?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the key is that we don't have like a threshold for publishing. And as a result, what our score, that unique score I was talking about, that blends all those variables, is looking at is this going to make sense for studios? Basically, are we going to make? Is there a chance that we can make enough money that it makes financial sense for the studio? So yes, you do hear a lot about our big hits. That's for sure, and you see them in the top charts, and it's great. We hear less about the hits that are smaller, and they may be less of a splash, but they make a lot of sense for our studios. Because as Shai was mentioning, even if you're generating 50, 100, 200K in the first few months, that's a big amount of money for a studio, and we want to back all of those games. So long story short is, we're launching a lot of games, and the big ones you hear about, of course, and the ones that I mentioned. The small ones are great as well. I mean, it's honestly to me, it's hard enough to launch a game. Big games are fantastic, and small and medium games are great. They make sense for studios. And the last point is, I would say that actually marketability is the lever that is the hardest to really crack. Once you have something that follows the basic rules, much harder to bring something from 40 cents if it's adequately portrayed down to 15 cents than it is to go back to the drawing board, launch the 40-cent game for sure, but then go back to the drawing board and say, okay, what makes people tick? What has a huge audience? What are the key ingredients to gameplay? Because we still think that CPIs are still gameplay driven.
Amazing. 200K. For guys, that's still a crore. So you can still become a crore, but if you don't become a millionaire, I mean, just to give a context, it's a super popular a local show called Kaun Banega Crorepati, which comes with $150,000, right? So it's the equivalent of being a millionaire in India. So still, you still gotta have it, right? With the smaller games, and even if you don't make this 200K, you make 30K or 40K, you are building up your runway to make your big hit, right? That's really important to also see, as long as it doesn't take away your focus and bandwidth while you're building the bigger games. Cool. So this is being this highly sought after studio publishing houses. Every studio wants to work with you, or most of you, and every publisher who is starting new, or even if they are not new, looks for financial support from publishers. Right? We all know it, but. We all have our incentives to financially support our studios. But apart from that, and for me personally, I feel that's where it's important. And from the early talking points you mentioned, Shai and William and also Alex, coaching, right, and mentoring. So can you guys share from each of you, like, is some of this coaching, mentoring things that a developer can expect from you? If they don't have a track record of making hyper casual hit games or even hyper casual games.
Sure, I'll take it.
Yeah, sure.
I'd separate the answer into two. So the crazy hubs and non-crazy hubs. So for the crazy hubs, these studios that are just starting or on the track where in order to build up their portfolio would get obviously financial support, but more than that is the mentoring and the accelerator and some of the courses and lectures that we give to our hubs in order to enter this market. For the non-hubs, so I feel that directing the studios towards a potential, or let's say a more potential concept or prototype would help them in order to avoid overspending or prototyping games that have less success. And lastly, I would say that if you collaborate with a publisher that, for example, are able to provide you with data points that you can learn from, either on a dashboard or outsourced, I think this is important because developers can easily, transparently understand the KPIs and not just CPI, retention, usage, but other metrics that are relevant in order to understand the potential of a concept or a specific genre or a color palette and others, would make sense for them to use these data points to improve their prototyping process for the games that they're testing and for future games. So imagine that you're a studio and you're testing two creatives, and you're able to clearly understand the metrics per creative, per network, things like CTR, CVR, impressions, clicks, obviously CPI usage and retention, but anything that can help you understand, does fail work better, does win work better, does a runner work better with this combination or not. So these kinds of data points can definitely help these studios, and if you are able to collaborate with a publisher that can provide you with that, it's a great added value for early, but not just that, for even more advanced studios.
Great, Shai.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think, if money was the only thing we offered, we'd be an investor and not a publisher, right? Certainly, for Quali, we always want to make a long-term relationship. We're never thinking about the one current game only. It's all about how can we develop a relationship with a developer? How can we get the next game and the next game and the next game and sort of continue to make successes with the developers we work with? And it's a very, very similar set of things that we offer. As Shai was saying, we want to give advice on themes, how gameplay works, what are the game design best practices, and then it's access to the sort of the really experienced teams that some smaller developers might not have, right? So we have in-house ad teams that are working on what's the best way to market your product, what's the best way to make a creative, what's the best way to position your title. Then also, access to our internal development team, access to other development teams, sharing some of that knowledge with teams that have had success and are having repeatable success, transferring that knowledge around the ecosystem of developers we work with, sharing the KPIs from a number of games, seeing what has worked, what hasn't worked. Really, it's arming the developer with as much information as they can possibly get, so that the titles they work on internally at their studio have got the best chance of success. And I think that's far more valuable, sort of those additional services, than the money will ever be.
Excellent. Alex?
Yeah, so I think that the key thing to the publisher studio relationship is definitely both the human side. So actually, are you kind of buddies with your publishing manager? Is actually really important. And before managing the team, I was definitely working very closely with studios on games, and frequently saying, okay, well, not that frequently, but occasionally saying, okay, it's not working super well. I know another publishing manager in the team that would be a better fit, so let's switch it up. And I find that the human fit is actually almost like half the story. It's a bit weird, but you kind of get into a groove. You need to find the right person in the team, and so we shift people a lot around. And once you have the right person and you're in the right groove, the next big thing is how are you bouncing off ideas each other, and especially how is your publishing manager helping you as a studio find great ideas? Unfortunately, the answers never come from us. We're never going to tell you. We're never going to send you a game spec. We're never going to tell you the answer, because it might kind of work once, but it's not what will help our studios become self-sustaining and achieve repeat success. What we find gets a studio into the area of repeat success is asking the right questions, giving high-level coaching, which always comes back to how do you ideate? What are the key ingredients of success for a game? No matter where your idea is coming from, what is your ideation framework process? And then, of course, we bounce ideas. We get our hands dirty, and we get into product roadmaps together. But the key thing is, to me, the vibe, getting real coaching, not answers, and then obviously, leveraging all the capabilities, some of which William mentioned. The creatives, the market devs early on, the launch ops, Android support. I mean, there's a whole bunch of people looking at every launch here, but to me, the key is that first spark.
Excellent points. Yeah, same at Sunday as well. And I would encourage all developers that if for whatever reason the relationship with your publishing manager doesn't work, don't be afraid to just approach the publishing house and maybe ask them to work with it. I mean, it's both ways, right? It's also not nice for the publishing manager when it doesn't work for you. Like Alex mentioned, it's like a tango, right? And this is what makes every publishing manager and every publishing house go beyond their 9 to 5, right? It's like I see prototypes all the time in the nights and stuff, and it's exciting for me only when it's exciting to work with the studio, and when the studio also takes stuff from us. And at Sunday also we have this one team, one family approach. For example, if someone is struggling with art assets and stuff, we just give them, right? At the end of the day, for all of us, what is important is that we make a hit game. Doesn't matter you provided ad assets, or you provided this data, this coaching, or whatever. So yeah, please look into these aspects while working with the publisher. I think it's super important, and it's about. I mean, confidence comes from success, right? And I think this coaching goes a long way into for you guys to make a hit, right? Okay, moving on. I think. I'm just watching the time. We are running a little bit late. I hope that's okay with you guys. This is the last talk of the film, so it's okay for us to go 5-10 minutes over time. I think it's super engaging, so I just lost track of time. So one or two, and each of you represent like I said again, a big popular publishing houses get hundreds and thousands of studios who want to work with you. As the head of publishing, is there any one or two tip you could get for a new developer with no track record? Let's say they start today, to stand out from your crowd and catch your attention. Anyone can take it.
I'll take it then. So in my point of view, if you're a beginner and you're just entering the hyper-casual market, there are a few things that you can do in order to collaborate with the publisher. The first thing that I would do, if I was an indie developer who just started to build my portfolio, is firstly to play the top chart games, play hyper-casual games, and play the publisher's game, and try and understand the current market and the state. And once I understand it, the first thing that I would do is create a prototype to submit to the publisher, and maybe add to it a pitch. But at this point, it's very, very important to think of the publisher as, let's say, the end player that is now watching an ad of a hyper-casual game, scrolling their Instagram feed or their Facebook feed. You have less than 3 seconds to catch their attention. Maybe do the same. You want to catch the publisher's attention. You want to catch the publishing manager's attention. Think of it as a hyper-casual market at that side as well. Create a prototype with a really good wow moment in the first few seconds. Submit the video. If it's a pitch, what would be the name of the game? How would you describe it in 1 or 2 sentences that you can clearly understand what will be the game about? If it's a work in progress and it's not the final version, mark it as a work in progress, so the publishing manager will understand the concept and how will you see the end results there. And I think these metrics, and if you think of it as a hyper-casual market on both sides, you can successfully collaborate with the publisher and hop on a call and discuss what's next, and get access to a dashboard where you can start submitting games and start testing. And on that, it doesn't end there. You want to get some guidance, and you want to stand out, and you want to collaborate with the publishing manager. And as Alex said, it's definitely important, the partnership there and and by that you'll be more successful. And I think this is very, very critical.
Amazing answer. So crack the CTI with zero CPI, right? Well, you would like to go next?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with it. Everything that Shai said. It's kind of like a job interview or trying to date someone new, right? You need to understand what's going to work in the market, what sort of things are happening right now, take into account some of the best practices that you're seeing. And then it's also, really comes back to what Alex was saying earlier. The relationship is super important, right? So be persistent, speak to the publisher as much as you can, show that you're taking an interest in what the publisher's doing, and generally be a good partner to work with, right? We all want to be working with positive teams that are really trying to do some good stuff. And I think if you're making sure that you speak to your publisher a lot, or speaking to other publishers, and making sure that they know that you're out there and you're doing good stuff, that's the building blocks of having a successful relationship. So it is about finding someone you jive with, someone that you can bounce ideas off. And I think if you can do that, it's very likely that people are going to want to publish your content. It's all about winning them over as a person, and then showing that you've got the expertise to be successful with the content that you're making.
Great. Alex?
Cool. I'll give my slightly biased response or tip. With Voodoo, the process is that so when you sign up to our platform, there's two outcomes basically. One is we pick you up directly in the publishing team because we see a great potential in your existing prototypes. But for studios that are a bit younger and then really just getting started, the outcome is usually that we give you full access immediately to our testing platform. So you're able to look at all sorts of video content. You get to hear my boring voice for a few hours probably, where we cover previous successes, but also basic and theoretical stuff on what makes people tick in hyper-casual. And that, we think, enables you, both testing and learning, enables you to produce prototypes that typically get better and better. And then as soon as we see a prototype back to my score, but that shows potential, we will contact you. And that could happen pretty quickly, even for a small team. You could be a 1 or 2 person team in India or elsewhere, and suddenly be working with 10 people at Voodoo. So we really, there are, back to Shai's point, there are no barriers to entry. It's all about how you react with the content that we provide. How you test, the discipline, the rigor, how you understand the market, as William was saying, as well. And very quickly, I mean, we have a studio that started out in hyper-casual, beginning of the year, studio behind FlexRun. They published FlexRun in June, or they launched it in, over the summer. I'm not saying this happens every day, but they didn't, December 2020, they weren't doing any games. So this can go quickly, and very quickly you keep getting the attention of a lot of people at a publisher. And so I think it's all about that initial self-learning, self-testing period can be challenging, but it can also be super motivating when you consider the rewards and then the attention you can actually get fairly quickly with a publisher.
Amazing answer. Yeah, for me also personally, it would be, my first tip would be don't clone. It's not going to go anywhere, right? Just if you like a clone with the team for something that has like already 10 similar games out there. But having said that, someone did catch my attention once by cloning our top grossing, like our top game, and breaking down as to how they will do it better. So it did show me, okay, there is some design thinking here. There's something about going a little bit deeper than the surface, right? But it's not an everyday occurrence. But yeah, I think Mark Pincus coined this proven better new. And in hyper casual, I would just say ignore the new, and it's about true and better, right? If you're doing something really new in terms of if the player has to like spend more than 3 seconds to learn the mechanic of the game, probably it's not going to work out. But yeah, it's important to see what the latest trends are. Are you up to the latest, not necessarily the latest social trends, but at least what works in hyper casual, right? Awesome. With this, I'll go to the two last questions for the session. Key things that a studio can learn from the field test, and what can they take and best way to move forward to that next potential from these learnings?
I can start on that one if you like. So I think there's a few things here that you should always keep in mind. The first one is that failing is quite normal in hyper casual. It happens to everyone. It's unlikely that all of your games are going to be big hits, and as don't get downbeat by it. Understand that it's part of the process and keep going. Then the really important thing is learn from the failure. Right? Why did it happen? Was it something to do with the game? Was it something to do with your process? What is it that you can change about what you've done so that the next games are going to be better incrementally or sort of a big step up? Then having a really strong pipeline of ideas is something that's important. You don't want to be one game fails and then waiting a long time before you can even get going again. Having a backlog of game ideas that you can pick up and sort of move on to quickly, that's being iterated on as you learn more things. I think it's very important just to keep up that momentum, testing more games and getting closer to having a hit. Listen to the advice of your publishing team. See what they have to say. They'll have seen a lot of games go through multiple different processes. They'll have a bit of an understanding of why certain things might have happened, and they'll be able to help you hone what you're working on. And then, finally, it's just that you have the mindset of always refine, always keep learning. And, if you're getting better every time, you're going in the right direction. If you're not, then maybe you need to tweak the way that learning process has gone. But I think if you're methodical about the way you approach testing and the way that you bring games to market, the way that you develop your ideas, then you should slowly but surely always be getting closer to having that hit that you're looking for.
Perhaps I will jump in here, and I'll keep it short and repeat some of William's answers. I would say fail to succeed, learn from your failures. I would say listen to the hyper-casual market and trends and changes. And lastly, nothing is guaranteed. So if you feel very strongly about a specific concept, keep it short and prototype it fast to test it, because you'll never know. Maybe your hunch makes sense. So if you have a really good idea and a cool concept, don't invest too much in creating a full game with tons of levels. Test it very quickly for marketability test and see if it goes well.
Awesome.
And from my side, I think it's a great question, because failure is one thing that I think happens more in gaming, certainly mobile gaming, than in many other industries. And we find that studios that are comfortable with failure and accept this as a condition, not just for 1 or 2 prototypes, but sometimes for 6 months, 8 months, 10 months. And we're there to support studios in the meantime, by the way. And those who are able to accept that and truly learn from the failure, meaning not take it personally to fail 5 times in a row, for example, but say, what are the trends that I see? And we're here to help as well in identifying them. What is the big picture over all of these prototypes that I'm doing maybe off? How can I improve big picture, not at a micro level? I think those are those attributes are what separate sometimes the studios that are able to make it through from those that find it just too tough and don't see the light at the end of the tunnel.
I think, yeah, I would like to add, ask a publishing manager. They're more than happy to share. And I'm really grateful, Alex, that you mentioned it's really okay to fail even for 6, 8 months, because sometimes young studios start doubting themselves after 4 or 5 weeks, or even like after 2 months. It's the sheer volume and competition, right? It's okay to fail as long as you learn, and you need to have some kind of an internal metrics to see how are you like able to take learnings into your next game or next prototype, and really be analytical about it. I mean this hyper casual is all about like really being super analytical, right from UA to your product metrics and everything, right? Cool. And this gets asked a lot, so I have to ask this last question for the day. Any current trends you can share for a hyper casual developer who wants to start on the next hit game potential today? Anyone can take it.
I'll jump in. Well, if you want to compete in our game competition, we've got a few more weeks. We'll take any submissions. We're doing one on balls and physics of balls. Very large theme. You can use it in any way. It can be part of the landscape, part of the avatars, part of the assets in the game. But we really think that physics-based games have a really outstanding chance based on the data we see. So that's the other thing. And my second quick tip would be don't look at the top charts, or look at the top charts to avoid them.
That's a good one. That's a good one. And from what I know, the winner gets $1 million, right?
So yeah, the winner. Wow, the news goes fast. But the winner of this competition gets $1 million. The winner. The winner gets at least 200K, and for outstanding games, it's $1 million. And there's no cap to how many games.
There you go. That's fast track to be the millionaire.
I'm very salesy on this.
Shai, you want to go next?
Sure, it's a tough question, but I'll answer shortly. Go with your heart and what you're doing best. So if you think going with runners is the best way to prototype with your studio, go for it. If you think that simulation, arcade, or other subgenres in hyper casual trends fits you, go for that, and don't look back.
Awesome. William?
Yeah, I agree with the other points that have been made. I think there's a few interesting things to keep in mind. Anything specific that we talk about right now is probably going to be out of date really quickly. I think you always keep that in mind. Alex bringing up the point about keep your eye on what the charts are doing, but don't do what's at the top of the charts right now. Understand what are the trends, what's moving through, what kind of things could be viable in the future. Always have that in mind. And then the other thing is understand all of these things, see what's going on, keep it in mind, but then figure out how can you innovate, what new things can you bring, how can you do things better, and what can that look like. And when you've got those ideas, what does scaling them look like? How do you what's going to be the sort of the later stage content? What are you going to build into those games to make them long-term successful after the testing period? Obviously, you don't need to have that lined up right from the very start, but it's always good to sort of have in mind directions it could go in, so that when that data comes through, you're ready to act on it quickly.
Amazing, thanks. And from my end, there's so many trends you can get lost. And also, not all trends can become a game, right? So really think about, can you make 10 unique levels out of this trend that you picked up, and also match it with your strength in terms of mechanics. Like, do you really have fun making those, or are you going to just do it because you think it's a trend? With that, I would really conclude this panel on my part. But if you guys are game for 5 or 10 more minutes, we can pick up some answers from the audience. There's one question for Chai directly. It says, do you guys still do a CTR tests?
No, we start with the marketability CPI tests.
There you go. How far in the future do you guys think India will come and focus? I mean, I guess that's why we are all here. It's already in focus. And then there was an interesting Do you have any data on average lifetime ROAS for hyper casual games? I don't know if anyone wants to take this.
Not sure I completely understand the question, but I guess it's very hard.
It's like, what do you think is the ROAS for hyper casual games, right? Like, what's the time frame you're looking at?
I think it varies very much between each game. I don't think there's a specific metric that we can say this or that, because it really depends on the game itself, the KPIs of the game, and how it performs on the market, the retention, and many other KPIs.
Right, and everyone is a lot of people. How do we contact you? I guess everyone here has a nice looking website, nice looking dashboards and photos. Let's go and sign up, and someone will really get back if you can stand out and they see potential. Every publisher is hungry for the hit for content, right? So you will not miss out if there is potential. I think we can take one last question. How would a publisher such as you view a studio with 25 failed prototypes against 125 failed prototypes? I don't get the question, but it's more about like how do you view someone with many failed prototypes?
It's actually a good question because you could say, well, 25 failed prototypes. First of all, it's a good volume, so it shows resolve and it's still possible. 125 failures. You could say, well, the probability of the 126th game being a success versus 26th is lower. Mm-hmm. But honestly, at this stage, it's all about looking at, to me, about looking at those prototypes. And you can look at them very quickly and determining where the areas of development are, and long story short, I think both are looking like good studios to me.
I like your Alex, I have to tell you.
I'd agree with that. I think it's not, the number is not important, it's the direction that they're moving in, right? Are those prototypes showing that there's a good process at that studio? Are they getting closer to having a successful game, or are they all absolutely terrible, right? So I think the numbers on their own don't tell the whole story. You need to look at some context behind them, and then it's sort of, that shows a much more realistic view on what that studio is capable of.
Awesome. Shai, do you want to give your perspective on this?
It's hard to say just looking at the two numbers. Did you prototype 125 unique games, not non-clones? Did you create hyper-casual games that fit today's market? Did you speak to a publishing manager? It's very hard to say. Both are very productive, obviously.
Yeah. And persistent, right?
Very persistent. Keep it going then.
Amazing. I think this is this would be my last question, and also one of my favorite, I guess. And I'm sure all of you guys also have been asked this many times. How long do you think hyper casual will last?
We've got at least 2 months, I think. At least January 17th.
We need to update our CVs.
Now, let me complement that answer. I think actually it's interesting because right before we launched Aquapark, I was wondering the same thing. And this is 2.5 years ago, I believe. It's 2.5 years ago. So, and in the meantime, a lot of successes have come. What's true is that we often forget how cyclical it is. So sometimes the market's going to be very challenging for 3 months and it's a big panic, and then it actually lifts back up. And that has to do with various things to me. It has to do with the number of competitors in the market, what's driving them, whether they just want to do downloads or margin. It has to do with how our advertisers within the year, is it December or September or September, where advertisers are more aggressive, or is it February, March, which is an easier period? for competitors. So I think it's easy to forget how cyclical it is when you're in the down. But to me, hyper casual is there to stay. People will always want snackable content. People will always require a higher level of execution, and there's no shortage of new ideas. In my view, it's not easy, but there's no shortage of it. Just because we have a track record of ideas doesn't mean there's a cap to how many new ideas we can push into players' hands. So we're here for the long run. We're really investing into our hyper casual side of the business, and I think that just reflects our view on the market long term.
Amazing. Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's not hyper casual games are not a fad. They're not something that it's a one trick pony. There's so much variety of content, variety of styles, different things you can do in these games. And as Alex says, people want snackable content. People have little periods of time that they want to fill in with some highly addictive piece of content. And I think as long as people have that desire, they're going to want to be playing hyper casual games, and that for us, I don't see that going away anywhere soon. I agree. I think it's here to stay for the long term.
Awesome. Shai?
So I'll answer with a question: why would hyper casual not last? Look at the top charts. 80% or above that are hyper casual games. But also, who plays hyper casual games? Everyone. It's not a niche. It's not a specific market. It's not directing to a specific audience. It's everyone. And due to that, I don't really see why there is a reason for these types of games to go down or disappear. The only thing that will happen is that the market will evolve and will continue to evolve. Things that we're seeing successful today are very, very much different than a year or 2 years ago, or even 6 months ago. And therefore, we'll continue to play hyper-casual games and enjoy them, and millions of players will continue to enjoy them.
Amazing. It's amazing answer. Same from me. I don't think it's going anywhere. I wouldn't change from a different genre to this if I thought that way. And for me also, there are a couple of simple questions to answer this question, right? If a game like Flappy Bird was to be made today, do you think people will not play it? Are the number of devices going down? And are people still open to play without paying for a short amount of time? Answer all these questions, and I think you have your answers. Right. So with this, I would like to conclude this panel. It went over time. So thank you, all of you, Alex, Shai, Will, for being such champs and staying over time and answering all the questions, for your patience, but also for your support and presence here. I really hope the audience took a lot from it, but I hope you also enjoyed the session here.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. It's been great.
Lovely.
Thanks for having us, and look forward to meeting a lot of studios.
Same. Bye, guys.
Definitely.
Take care.
Thanks. Good night, everyone.
Thanks. Oh, and before the audience goes away, I would like to again thank our sponsors for this event. We'd like to thank our presenting sponsor, Unreal Engine, gold sponsors, MPL, AWS, Glance, Jangly, legacy silver sponsors, GameShin, Lakshan, Yasnum, bronze sponsors, Quali and GameYon, Hyper Casual Tracks, Sunday, and IP Connect sponsor, Succeed Innovation Fund. Thank you all. And this brings to end the Hyper Casual track at this conference. Have a good night. Bye-bye.